How's it going, my Comic Chat Army? We're here today with Frank Martin, the creator of The Last Homicide. How you doing, Frank?
Hey, Cody, thanks for having me on.
Oh yeah, thank you for coming on with such short notice, like we did.
Oh, I make myself available all hours of the day.
Right. Is this book on Kickstarter now, or how are you?
It's
How are you gonna
launching.
fund?
It launches April 6th. So from when we're talking about this, it will be tomorrow, a few short hours.
All right. And where did you get the inspiration for the book?
So this, when I started talking about Pietro Vaughn, it was the illustrator of the book. We kind of started talking about what type of genres we wanted to work together in. He wanted to home in on crime, and I really wanted to do kind of like a straight crime murder mystery detective story. I didn't want to throw in any supernatural elements or sci-fi elements. I kind of wanted to just keep it strict noir. So I went back to kind of the roots of storytelling and golden age of Hollywood stuff like the Maltese Falcon, the film Double Indemnity, stuff like that. Really capitalize on the genre tropes of gumshoe on the case. So there's a whole host of stuff that we can pull from that kind of revolves around that era and that kind of story.
What's our detective's name? The main detective. What's it?
So there's two detectives. The main detective, his name is Wilmer, Detective Wilmer. He's an aging detective. This is his final case. So that's the last homicide. Is his last homicide case. He's about to retire, and on his last case, it's the murder of a mob boss's son. So it's his grown-up son. The mob boss was murdered, and in this particular city, there's two different mob bosses that are constantly bickering with each other, and he's afraid that this murder is going to tip them into all-out war. So he has to kind of solve the case and stop them from going to war with each other and tearing the city apart right before he retires.
All right. And is this a graphic novel? I mean, a trade paperback, or is it a?
The Kickstarter is for a floppy for a single issue. I think the story is like 23, 22, 24 pages, somewhere in there. And this particular story is a two-parter. So it's going to be part one is going up now. Part two will be coming in I don't know, 6 or 8 months or so. And it's just going to be
Not the lights. What was you telling me? I'm sorry.
the Kickstarter, what the Kickstarter is for. So the Kickstarter is for part one of a two-part story. It's just going to be parts one and part two. I think they're around 22, 23, 24 pages, somewhere like that for a floppy. And it's just going to be a two-parter, so there's not going to be any follow-up, no sequels. And when we do launch the second part, I guess we'll combine them. So we'll do two regular floppies if you want both of those, or a deluxe edition where we'll kind of slam them all together in like a 40-some-odd page book.
Oh, nice. Is this your first comic book ever?
No, I've been doing this for a couple of years now. I think this might be my 9th Kickstarter campaign, somewhere along there. I think I've done maybe 6 or 7 in comics. I've done a couple of novels too, prose stuff. But yeah, Kickstarter's been awesome for the comics community, kind of allowing creators like myself to fund projects. So that's why we keep coming back to it.
Oh, wow. Where can people pick up some of your earlier work?
So Kickstarter started this cool thing where they have Kickstarter add-ons now, where if you pledge, you can add on to your pledge and get more for your reward. So I like throwing a whole lot of my back catalog on there. So some people grab stuff like that. Once the Kickstarter campaign is over, I also put a lot of my books on my website through a store through my website, which is frankthewriter.com. So they could get a whole bunch of my past comics as well as some of my prose work. Some of my novel stuff is on there tui
Oh, nice. We're going to have to check it out after this interview so we can get a review going. So, I guess what got you into comics?
I just started reading it like any kid, really, because I got into the superheroes. Everyone gets into Spider-Man and Batman. I was a Spider-Man guy. So if I wanted Spider-Man stories, you got either watch the animated cartoon, which was huge in the 90s, or you went to the source, which was the comic books. And so it's a slippery slope, man. Once you start picking up Spider-Man comics, you just go to the next hero and the next superhero, and before you know it, you're going into the indie stuff, and it's just the addiction is very easy to fall into because it's such an awesome medium. It's like you get. I'm a big story guy, so story always comes first. But when you're reading a book, you're basically generating the art in your head. Whereas with a comic, you got this beautiful artwork that's right in front of you that's letting the story unfold. It's minimal amount of work on your part to kind of visualize it. So it's just a great medium.
All right, and you're the writer and the artist?
So for this particular story, The Last Homicide, I'm just the writer. I'm a terrible artist. I really am. I'm always surprised by writers that are able to do at least some sort of artwork. It may not be something that's presentable, that they can make a book, but they do their own thumbnails, they do their own layouts, they do their own character designs. I'm like, where can you possibly come up with this skill set? As a writer, I'm so busy writing, I'm so busy developing that side of the craft that I have no time to develop actual artistic skills. So yeah, stick figures is about the extent of what I'm capable of.
Oh, yeah. Well, what advice would you give to the writers out there?
It's just a matter of, it's kind of a simple answer, but reading and writing. You can't know what's good writing unless you do a lot of reading, you do a lot of consuming, and know what works and what doesn't work. And then you could find particular writers or authors that really emulate the style that you want to embody, and you could just basically copy them. Try to use their voice through your own words, and to the point, if you do it enough, you'll start to form your own voice, your own narrative. And the other aspect of it is just write. You're not just going to start writing and it's not going to be perfect right off the bat. It's practice. It's kind of trial by fire, and you learn by experience. And one of the key things I learned is momentum. You don't really, it doesn't matter how much you write during the day, as long as you're writing every day and you keep that momentum, because once you stop for one day, it's easy to stop for a week or a month, and then it's just that much harder to pick it up again. So even on days where I'm just super tired and I don't want to get any writing done, I try to write at least like a sentence or two, just something, so I can tell myself that I'm making progress on a project.
All right. Do you have your wife proofread it when you're done?
No, she did.
Or who's the support circle you have?
That's how I know that I have a semi-decent story, is if she's even willing to finish it. She's not a big reader. So she's read maybe 2 of my books. She's read a couple of my comics. She's not a comic person. So she'll read it and she'll be like, okay. I'm just like, thanks. That's very encouraging. But yeah, every once in a while she'll read something and she'll nod her head, especially if I keep it short. I do some like flash fiction that's like 1,000 words long and stuff, and she like those. I like that. It didn't take me that long, 5 minutes. That's good. So support. It's online community, man. It's really easy these days with social media to connect with like-minded people that are passionate about what you're passionate about, that want to learn. So it's really great to find that kind of support system, other people that are doing exactly what you're doing, that push you to be the very best you can on the next project and to grow. And that's where I don't know how people did it, but before that, it's hard to find people.
Oh yeah. Just gonna give you an oddball question here. If you could work with anyone dead or alive, who would it be to make a comic book?
Anyone dead or alive? This is going to be an oddball answer, but I'll say Alan Moore, because when I was really starting to get into comic reading, I loved his work. His work is so crazy, and everything he does is like a landmark. It's a milestone. It's huge, and I really love his work. But he's so crazy. He's nuts that it seems he's difficult to work with and to deal with. So to be able to develop a project with him, to bounce story ideas off of him, I think it would just be a wild experience. And I might hate him at the end of it because he's just such a weird guy. But just that experience would kind of be awesome, just to kind of see how his insane mind works.
All right. And I know that you're a family man. Have you wrote your family into any of your comics?
Sometimes. People always ask me, is this particular person inspired by this other person? Like if they know them and they read some of my work, and they're always an amalgamation of a bunch of people. You know, it's never as clear cut as this person is directly inspired by this person. I think I maybe did that once. I had a dream with my wife in the story, so I kind of just rewrote the dream, and it was basically her playing that character. But other than that, it's just drips and drabs of inspiration, drips and drabs of characteristics thrown into a character. So although there might be hints of that person, it's never as clear cut as this person is just transplanted into the story and becomes that character.
All right.
I think it's dangerous too in a way, because when you do that, you don't want to be like, this person wouldn't act the same way as the character, and you don't want to do that. You want to make the character act how the story is supposed to unfold. So if they're representative of a character, you don't want to kind of box yourself in by having them only act the way this person in real life would act.
Never thought about it like that. What advice would you give people for Kickstarter? How to run a successful Kickstarter?
Kickstarter, the first advice I would give them is manage your expectations. You know, Kickstarter is not a miracle. You can't just put your book on there. A lot of people think that if you build it, they will come, as far as the Kickstarter page goes. But that's just not the reality. The Kickstarter page is nothing more than a tool. You still have to put the work in, and to get it in front of as many eyeballs as possible, you still have to market yourself the right way. You still have to push it and make sure that the product is really good quality. And it's just another tool. It's just another step on the journey. You can't really just think that, yeah, I'll just put it on Kickstarter and that's what I'll do. You know, that's just it's a business model, but it's not a miracle worker.
All right. Are you signed with the publisher, or you're just?
So not currently. I was with a publisher a couple years ago that folded then, and I was like, what am I going to do? Because I got all these projects, and Kickstarter's really given me the opportunity to bring these books out there to the point where now I would consider using a traditional publisher as a kind of complementary to Kickstarter in a way. You know, if every book that I make, I'm designing for Kickstarter or crowdfunding, so that if I were to, I'm constantly pitching with these projects, and if a publisher, and I always say that I'm running a Kickstarter campaign at this time frame, and if a publisher came back and said, we would love to sign this book, but we don't want you to run the Kickstarter for it, we just exclusively want to put the book out there, I would probably pass. You know, I don't want to. Kickstarter is a huge vehicle for me to get it in front of people. That's how I build my audience, and if they want to limit me in that regard, I don't know. I can't guarantee that the amount of money that I'll make through a Kickstarter is going to be the same amount of money that I'll make through a publisher. I mean, if they tell me, look, we're going to sell thousands of copies, you don't have to worry about that. I mean, okay, but I don't know what publisher is going to make those promises at this stage of my career.
All right. What kind of distribution do you have? Can people request your books in their local comic shops?
No, I'm doing it personally. I'm doing it all myself. I like to funnel it through my website, and I'm sending it out. That said, I have worked with retailers that have stocked my books, so it's not like I'm not in Diamond or anything, so they can't order the books directly from Diamond. But if they go to their comic store, their LCS, and the owner reaches out to me and says, we want to order some of your books, I'm always up for giving retailer discounts and getting my books in stores that way.
All right. Okay, I was going to ask, what cons did you have planned, but we're not doing those anymore.
Last year, 2020, I was naively saying at the end of 2019, I was saying 2020 is going to be my convention year, because I've been so busy with my kids that it's so hard to take a road trip or a weekend off. Mm-hmm. And I was like, 2020, I'm going to do it. And I had one con in like January, and then I had another lines up for April, and then of course March and April is when everything kind of went on lockdown. And I was going to do the great Philadelphia con. It was like in April, and then they pushed that back to Labor Day, and then they pushed it back to this April, and it was like 2 weeks ago is when they finally sent up the email and said, obviously we're not having it because it's going to be just too difficult to have. But I have my table booked, so it's like they have my money. They said, well, just whenever we have it is when you get to come. So I have no idea when they're going to have it, and because they don't want to make any promises and end up pushing it back again. So we'll see. But yeah, I had a whole bunch of conventions on a list lined up for last year, and that kind of fell apart. So I mean, I'll be open to doing conventions again. It's so hard for me to get to them in the first place, that to go through the process of trying to figure out in this chaotic atmosphere which ones that I'll actually attend and do. And so I'm just it's on hold for now.
Do you go to the ones only in your state, or do you travel outside of your state?
I mean, I would definitely travel outside my state. I'm in New York, so I was going to go to the Great Philly Con, which is obviously in Pennsylvania. The one I did last year in January was in New Jersey. So I spoke to the guy from Terrificon, which is in Mohegan Sun, which I've heard is great for Indiecomics. I spoke to the guy that runs it. He was pretty cool. I might do that every once in a while. That one's tricky because it usually falls on the weekend of my son's birthday. So it's like I can't abandon him. But
Right.
I hear Baltimore Comic Con is pretty good. C2E2 I did a couple years ago. That was a great one. So yeah, I'm always open for traveling, going, but it has to make logistical sense. Conventions are a huge pain, either flying or staying somewhere and transporting merchandise. So it's a lot that goes into it.
All right. Let's see. Do you sign your books on request?
I do on my request. I never say no. I'm just happy enough somebody's going to give me money to read my books in the first place, that if they say they want to sign it, I'll never turn them down. I get a lot of people that say, can I get the artist to sign it too? And that's always a tricky thing, especially when they're overseas. Mm-hmm. My previous campaign was for The Polar Paradox, which is kind of a sci-fi book. And I met the artist at a local con here in New York. And so he's like an hour away or so. So that was kind of cool that I was able to offer double signed books, and we just kind of met up and signed them at the same time. So that's always a blessing. But yeah, I will absolutely sign and personalize any books if somebody asks.
All right. I don't know. Is there anything you want to tell the people before we go?
No, nothing. The Last Homicide is kind of a love letter to noir and pulp, and those old school detective stories. I grew up loving movies like Seven or what else? Who Framed Roger Rabbit? Those shoes. They're movies. They're about detectives, but they blend into other genres. Seven's like a psychological horror movie. It gets pretty dark. Who Framed Roger Rabbit is obviously a wacky comedy, but they both pull from those tropes. Those detectives on the case, aging, retiring detective, and the young kind of upbeat partner. And I wanted to boil that kind of story down to its core. So something that doesn't really try to pull from other places. So it's really that hardcore beat cops on the grind, trying to crack the case story. So if you like that kind of stuff, give it a look.
All right. And one last time, what did you say the name of your website was?
So I'm easy. FrankTheWriter.com is where you can find it. I'm also on social media, Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, @FrankTheWriter. So that's how you find me. Remember me, Frank the Writer. And I'm pretty much everywhere, or I try to be at least.
All right. Thank you, Frank.
Thanks, Cody.